Howdy hackers, and welcome to another episode of FairLight TV. I know there is one thing I do that you really love, and that is interviews, because out of all the episodes we are doing, the biggest attendance and the kind of longest watch duration as well is on the interviews. So that's why we bring you another interview. This time it's Luigi di Fraia, one of the really cool guys involved in the C64 scene. He has been contributing greatly to the stuff that we actually do here on the scene with his full set of hardware and also full set of tools that provide support for a number of the aspects that you might want. Tap Clean is probably the piece he's most known for, and also the tape interfaces is one of those things that I promoted here on the channel as well. So over to the interview with Luigi. And no, he's not the younger brother of Mario, just so we take that out of the picture. Hello guys, and welcome to FairLight TV. We have had most of the guys, me digging into C64 related stuff and some Amiga stuff, and then we've had a number of people related to FairLight. This is actually the first guest we're having who has no connection whatsoever with FairLight, but he's a cool guy, and I would like to introduce you to Luigi di Fraia. Welcome, Luigi.
Thank you very much. Nice to be here.
Cool. There are basically two big aspects of this. One is going through a number of the projects that you are involved with, and they are so many. And I've shown a number of your items on the show before. And then the other part, where you are one of the super experts, is the tapes, C64 tapes, how they actually work. I would like to finally have somebody who understands it, that explains to me the 3 skid marks that are in all the tap analysis tools. But we will get to that. So if you are as curious as I am on what are those skid marks that you will see, the 3 skid marks, then you have to wait, because we will first have to go through Luigi's projects. And I've separated that into 3 sort of blocks. One is software on bigger system. The other one is the hardware stuff that you're doing. And then also kind of software project on the C64. So let's take them one by one. Tap Clean, a magnificent tool that I use on a regular basis. Yeah. Do tell.
Yeah, I mean, Tap Clean on SourceForce recently gained a community badge because it had 10,000 downloads, and I'm sure some of them will be bots and but the project has been there for a long time. So originally, Tap Clean was a fork of Final Tap, the console version. The original author, Stuart Wilson, actually donated it to the community of enthusiasts that was active on IRC at the time, and we took it. And I was one of the members that started the new project that was called the Tap Clean. Bocavamo was another one, Fabrizio Gennari was another one, and we had got help from Tom Rogers Cowan and from Rob Taylor as well. So it was a bunch of individuals. We did various things. Some of them provided the raw material, for dumping and doing the research on the tape loaders. Some of them actually contributed code, and I've been, contributing a lot of the code, and we went through refactoring and adding support for new loaders, that sort of thing. What I also did was to reintroduce the visual element of it. Final Tap was born as a GUI application, but the one that was donated to the open source community was the console version. So I did a front end to try and bring in the features that were available in the past in the GUI version. And I've also had, along with features that were already there, like the decoders for PRG files to decode, disassemble the code as basic program, or just a hex dump sort of tool. I also added the new features that are not necessarily just a front-end feature. They are just a new, kind of new bunch of tools for analysis, inspection, and that's the sort of thing I was mainly interested in when I joined the project. I wasn't so much interested in the cleaning side of Tab Clean, because it can't remaster essentially tapes and bring them to their original quality. What I was really interested in was the tape loaders, was I tried to understand how people had done, coded loaders, build the history actually of who copied from who, because they pretty much all copied from each other. That was the reality. And so I wanted to try and fill in, kind of the historical side of the thing. So I wanted to actually get to a history of loaders at some point, and I still plan to do that. And that probably would be part of, the book I'm working on, which is going a bit slowly. But eventually, I was planning to put in the history of tape loaders. So it's not only technical analysis that allows people to actually preserve and restore the data in those tapes, but also tells you, how they came about, roughly in what time was the author behind them, and things like, we know Paul Hughes did freeload as example. That is kind of a classical example. But there are so many people behind loaders, and I'd like to actually fill that gap. So my main interest though was the preservation. I wanted to make sure that once you make a digital backup of tapes, you actually have means to check the integrity of them. And if, as example, there were a number of broken tab files when I first started. This was at the time the CIA website was on. I think Ben Cathericum was the maintainer of that website, and they had a lot of tab images in there.
Sorry, the CIA. I had. We're not talking Central Intelligence Agency here.
We're not talking the USA thing. No, we're not talking the USA thing. But it was after the chip, the CIA.
Yeah.
And he had a massive collection that I used for research purposes, essentially. But when they were uploaded there, nobody was doing integrity checking. So although most of them were fine, what was happening is some of them had problems with the sort of digitalization process. And I was researching, and some of them were my favorite games. Creatures had that problem, Apex Software, Roland Brothers, Last Ninja 3 had the problem. And, these are some of the games I grew up with, so I really wanted to fix them.
Yeah, they should be perfect. I mean, the ones you love, they should be perfect. Just so we say it, Tab Clean is a multi-platform tool for managing tab files. Just so we have said that. We sort of assumed that when we dived into it.
But by all means, because I'm knee-deep in this tab, I probably kind of forget about the basics. I mean, the actual description of these tools. But it's essentially, it was meant to be the one-stop shop for anyone who wanted to actually dig a little bit deeper into their digital backups of 8-bit tapes. Also, because don't forget, I mean, there is support for some MSX formats in there as well.
Including do they have special loaders as well in those, or does the kernel work properly with a reasonable speed in other systems?
Right, there are kind of built-in loaders that I know about. So the support for that one is in, but there are also custom schemes, as far as I understand from the community.
Yeah. Right. Well, I mean, I will probably have a link to the program down below, and possibly also links to previous episodes where I've shown Tab Clean being a great program. So, but I do have to ask. I mean, your relation to Tom. Tom is doing Tapex, which is sort of the other program, Windows only. But the other program, are you sort of competing with him, or is that friendly collaboration?
To be honest with you, Tapex was born out of Tom's frustration with the progress with Tab Clean and certain choices that we were making. I mean, by all means, there is no sort of hard feelings in this. It's just like he decided that he couldn't put up with the sort of choices that were made for Tap Clean, and he wanted to do his own thing. I mean, he wanted to do something for a long time, so I think eventually he got to work on it, and he produced it. I suppose there was a lot of information he was able to leverage from the existing Tap Clean, and from the fact that it's open source, so you can actually check both its documentation and its code, but he made his own choices. And as a matter of fact, I know he put a lot of work in it. So, I mean, best of luck to both of us, I suppose. And besides, remember, it's Tap Clean is also Bo and Fabrizio and, Rob for information and material. So it's a little bit more of a wider team. And as you said, it's actually, cross-platform. Even the front end, I've created builds for Mac OS, so it's available pretty much everywhere, or even on Raspberry Pi. As long as you have a Raspberry Pi 3, which is what I have, you can run it there as well.
Cool. Yeah, I like the program. I use it a lot. I use TapX as well, so I juggle between them, and sometimes I'm leaning more towards one, and sometimes I'm leaning more towards the other. But I'm really glad that there are two options. I mean, even if you don't compete, I still see it as sort of competition, and for me, competition is always good. So.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm sure that TapX does some of the things better, or has got support for loaders that Tap Clean hasn't got. I will eventually get there myself, but it's kind of I'm juggling a number of things that it's a little bit difficult to make progress. At the speed I used to make progress with Tap Clean.
So we should say special highs to Tom, and Tom is actually kind of one of the reasons we're having this discussion, because he was too shy to be on the channel. He wanted you to do it instead. So just so you know.
I appreciated the trust that Tom has got. I mean, we've known each other for, I don't know, from the ERC times. So we've never met, but yeah, we've been talking, sometimes having arguments, and sometimes, getting back, to kind of a more reasonable level playing field. But yeah, it's been, and I know he cooperated with, I mean, at least with suggestion. I'm not quite sure, he was on a code level, but lots of suggestions to Stuart Wilson himself. So he was, I mean, Tap Clean is also actually, the product of work and the contribution that Tom has done. Indirectly, possibly suggestions, material for research and that kind of stuff, but we're pretty much all intertwined.
Cool. So let's leave Tap Clean then and go to one of your other projects, the Integrator. So it's a program that kind of takes Last Ninja format, and you can go in and you can have a look at how Last Ninja is built, but you can actually also kind of rebuild your own Last Ninja with it, can't you? I know you found a number of bugs in the original, like graphical elements where you had opinions on how they were placed.
Yeah, that's right. I mean, this all started in, the program, the viewer itself is called Integrator 2012. And this is because in 2012, I was doing, was putting it together, and I was essentially reverse engineering the graphic engine in John Tweedy's games, which did include the Last Ninja series, but it also included Time Machine and Vendetta. So they used the same graphic engine, which was called at the time Integrator. And I started doing reverse engineering of that engine. And what happened is that I really wanted to make sure that I was understanding the engine correctly. I was making the right calls when disassembling it. And the best way to do that was to actually have a program that would read in the original data and produce something that you could do visual inspection of. And so that's how the viewer was born. And you could initially edit a single location. Then I had all the decoding necessary for showing objects, composition of objects, and add editor features until the point where I also added the specific tools to decode other data that was used by the engine in Last Ninja 2. And that was the clipping masks for the sprites. So if the sprite goes passed an object, then part of the sprite needs to be deleted in order to create the impression that it's passing behind the object and it's being covered. And also the kind of walk boundaries, where it can go and where it stops, or where it can go and maybe if it crosses a certain line it either falls and dies, or something happens or changes location. So I kind of reverse engineered pretty much all of it in the hope that that would, stir up a little bit of curiosity in the Last Ninja community, so that people would be inspired to actually write Last Ninja 4.
So it works for Last Ninja 1, 2, and 3. Other games?
It works for, I do have, the data extracted also from Vendetta Time Machine, and the GUI is customized for those games as well. So if you run the binary for Time Machine, as example, the dashboard is at the top, and if you run it for Last Ninja, the dashboard is at the bottom and one of the sides. So it kind of reflects what where the dashboard is in the game itself.
Cool. So if you don't have anything better to do, then do Last Ninja 4, or feel free to do Vendetta 2. That's also cool. So
yeah, absolutely.
And if you have any questions on how to do that, then Luigi is your guy. Luigi, I should also say that you have a lot of material on YouTube. You have your blog as well, where you have technical tips for people interested in the C64. So I would encourage you to also visit those places, just so I ensure that I have mentioned those as well. So let's go to your next program. And this is actually something I wasn't aware of before the Sarge mentioned it in the second episode, the raster effects editor.
Yeah. I think this was developed because ESG contacted me and he said, in Hokuto Force, which is by the way, is the team I belong to.
Yeah.
And he said he wanted to.
Luigi, hold on. I have this. You will not see this because, but now I changed the FairLight logo in the bottom to a Hokuto Force logo. So from now on, we will have the Hokuto Force logo underneath your picture.
Thank you very much. Yeah.
Sorry, go on. Enrico.
And, say again?
Your pal, the guy that wanted you to do the program.
Yeah, ESG. It's one of the kind of group sort of overlords in organizer, I should say.
Yeah.
In Hokuto Force, together with the Overkiller.
Yeah.
And so he said, it'd be cool if we had the tool for our own team to produce images that are similar to what Electric was doing in the border. If you have in mind the raster split or Windy, you know exactly what I'm talking about. And I looked at them and I was so impressed. I said, I want to do this. Absolutely. I'm going to do a tool, but a proper tool, a graphical tool. And I started making it. And obviously I have not a, kind of the background of a graphician, the end user. So I did it as a developer, and I thought to myself, now if I give this to the graphic artists, they are going to complain. I'm pretty sure they're going to complain because the user interface is probably not something that they would interact with. For a developer, it kind of fits the bill, all the requirements, they're all satisfied. And so I told internal, I said, look, before we distribute this, we need somebody who's competent and can give, that sort of feedback, the end user feedback. And what happened is that I was put in contact with Towing. And sorry if I'm pronouncing your name wrong. I'm really struggling with some of these names. But so we had a few sessions on Discord, and we actually created the second user interface, the sort of minimalistic one in which you can interact just with keys and numbers, this sort of things. And he provided lots of suggestions, lot of ideas on the automation tools, the tools that fill in the raster, the borders with automatically based on the contents of a picture. He provided the high contrast palette as well, so that you can distinguish colors better. So a lot of credit goes to him as well, because it made it palatable to an end user, where initially it was kind of a developer dream, but it wasn't. It was probably a graphic user nightmare.
No, but I don't think you should say that, because Joachim's view on this is that this is a tool where he will need no coder involved. So he can take his picture, load it in, and he will not rely on somebody else doing work for him, because he hates that. I mean, he wants to put stuff out and he wants them to look as good as possible. And if you have like a dependency of somebody else, then that would take time, and so yeah, he absolutely loves it, and again, it was presented on the second episode of the interview. So if you haven't seen that, see the second interview with the Sarge, and have a look at how the raster effect editor can improve a picture. It gets rather stunning, to be honest. I mean, you take the picture and then suddenly, boom, it becomes big, and it's so much nicer, even if you just add a little like standard raster split code on it.
Yeah. My idea was, I was trying to throw out the idea that if you control the raster box properly, you can actually get depth as well.
Yeah.
And I gave an example in our team on Facebook, an example of how I could see a 3D object, and it would actually give you the perception depth. Nobody has really done anything in that sense, other than Toing himself. The spaghettification image he created, that did give a little bit of the kind of third dimension kind of feeling to his picture, and I was quite pleased that he had done that, because thinking outside of the box is it's one of the best things that when I see people using the program and not just do something that has already been done, but use the technology for doing something else. That's the satisfying bit.
Cool. So let's go to we did prepare a number of points, but I just like to bring something up which I don't think we even discussed first, and that was your G64 analysis thing that visualizes the content of the disk and all the manipulation you do on that. Could you elaborate a bit on that?
Right. So that actually goes into the kind of disk research that I've been doing in the last few years, because I've tried to cover pretty much everything: tapes, disks, and cartridges, as you know.
Yeah.
So the CBM Flux Studio, which ended up being called like that, also based on your suggestion, the Flux Studio already existed as a program, and I added the CBM to it, because you pointed out, there's already a program that's called like that. But essentially, what you can do is not only do the same thing that you do with Tap Clean for tapes, essentially provide feedback on the integrity of a disk image. But you can also prepare the disk image for being written back to disk. And this is a very, very tricky point. I mean, forget about flippy disks and all those shenanigans. The biggest shenanigan is the G64 format itself. The G64 format has got a really fatal flaw. You can work around it, but it's really a fatal flaw. Track data needs to be a whole number of bytes, and there's nothing you can do about it. It should have been defined as a whole number of bits, or flux inversions, if you or absence of them. But it was, unfortunately, it was defined as a whole number of bytes, which means when you create a track image, you actually might have to do some padding. And the place where you do the padding, you essentially had you had the bit cells without flux inversions, if you want. Only for standard DOS disks, you know pretty much where to do that. You go into a gap and you just extend the gap a little bit. That's very safe. But when you get to a custom format, you have no clue, unless you know how the data has been encoded, you have no clue where to put these gaps. And there could be, a standard sector and then custom data, which means, you have a good shot. Maybe you put it before the sort of the leading sequence, in which you have got 40-bit one, kind of inversions there. It can work. It does work in a number of cases, but for things like VMAX, Vorpal, forget about that. you have no chance. You actually need to know where you can do that safely. Now, that is also important when you want to ride it back, because when you ride a track back, the track by nature is cyclical. Yeah.
Yep.
So if you start riding and then you finish riding in the wrong point in the middle of a sector, that sector will get damaged. And again, if you don't know the structure of custom sectors, you don't know where a sector starts, and you end up with damaging the disk. Now, what we noticed with Tom, because the conversations with Tom happened also on disks.
Okay.
Is that CryoFlux DTC, which works most of the time. Don't get me wrong, great tool, great hardware, great software, great knowledge behind it. But as example for California games, what that tool would do is it would put the wrong right splice, as you could refer to it. So it's the point where to start riding in the wrong place for California games on one of the tracks. So if you brought a G64 produced by CryoFlux and DTC back to this, it would break track 27. So the ride would not load properly. And I said, this is really unfortunate, but it's kind of one of those areas in which it's very difficult to try and push these issues with the community behind this project. So I said, I'll start doing some digging, and as a matter of fact, I reverse engineered the whole format in the end.
Of course,
so
of course you did.
So I reverse engineered, and what I did is actually I pointed out it's very easy in the end when you know where to look to realign all of these tracks, and you can see a proper leading pattern, a trailer pattern, and you do all the padding in between. And when you start riding, you start from the leading. So it becomes trivial once you can see it. And the way to see it was to code actually CBM Flux Studio, because it gives you, visual inspection. Again, it's kind of, that's quite important, but also gives you sort of routines that, especially for Vorpal later, they actually can figure out where the trailer is and where the leading is. So they can go from a nib image, which contains more than one revolution for each single track, so that you are able to, pick and choose where you want to start the data, and then you can, essentially it becomes a ring buffer once you remove all the duplication in the track from a nib file, and then the only thing you need to do is actually to decide where you want to put the gaps. And again, it makes an informed choice about all of these things. And then the G64 image produced, it can be used by DTC with this DTC to write back to disk. And we know, we've tried this, that when you write back to disk, a lot of the problems that the DTC itself would have, they are solved by just doing that.
But I mean, tell me again the California game things. Why did track 37 break? What was the reason?
27 is the track. So essentially, DTC, when it converts from the raw streams, it creates a number of raw streams, one raw stream for each half track. When you ask it to convert to G64, it doesn't break the image. The image works in an emulator, but what it does, it puts the bright splice for track 27 for this specific version that Tom had dumped, I think. He had, I assume he had dumped it. So for that particular track, the right splice, again, it's the point you start writing the track when you write it back to physical disk is in the wrong position.
And this is one of the things that the 1541, because it doesn't read this little hole, it doesn't know where on the revolution you are, you just start writing. But then seemingly California Summer Games depends on that being on a particular place on the track.
It's not so much that. It's if you start writing in the middle of a sector, that's what it was doing. It tells you to start writing in the middle of a sector. And that sector will never cycle back once you finish writing. You always mess it up. There's no way around that. What you need to do is to start writing from the leading sequence, which is, kind of a handover, say, okay, I'm entering, but it's not data. The lead-in is absolutely not data. It's not decoded as data. What the DTC was doing is actually start writing the track in the middle of a sector. That's recipe for disaster.
Yeah, For sure, for sure. So, is DTC updated after this additional knowledge, or is it still sort of that?
Look, I published all of this. It's out there. If they want to find the information to actually do this, fix that problem, they have all the elements to do it. What I know is that I couldn't access any information from these guys. They just don't document these things. So, in my kind of attempt to help the community to do a better job, it's all open source, the stuff, and it's all published, and it's part of the book I was mentioning as well. And it's all there. What I couldn't quite reconcile is that once you know how the format, what the format is for Vorpal later, for the newer version of Vorpal, actually getting the right splice wrong is impossible. So it kind of makes me question, how does DTC get it wrong? It's just like it gets it right everywhere else. And it's a trivial issue. If you know the format, it's a very trivial, it's very simple to make that shot. But it wasn't making it as well. So that essentially escalated my curiosity for the format. I just reverse engineered everything.
So one of the things that always annoy me about if you have like a G64, you sort of expect it to work in the protected environment. So it should be a protected image that would work exactly like the original. Do you also have sort of functions that you could reintroduce the error if the G64 doesn't contain it properly? One of the example with Pirate Slayer boot, where I'm unable to find a working copy, a working G64 of Beachhead 2.
Right. I would have to check the specifics, because in my journey, what I have reverse engineered is just Vorpal and parts of Vmax at the moment. And each one of them is a case of its own, as you well know. So I will have to get there, and it might take some time to find actually the time to reverse engineer it. And I tried to get some feedback from the community through my blog. Say, look, guys, I've done all of this for Vorpal later, for the newer version of Vorpal. I've shown to you what we really need. Is there any of you wants to come forward and do the same for a different format? And let's leave it at that.
I'm absolutely happy to help. The thing is, the way I've cracked stuff is that I understand the loader and how to interface the loader. How the loader then interface the media, I don't care. I never needed to sort of worry about that. I just needed to see that the loader does this. So if I feed it with these parameters, I get this file out, and then I remove the loader because I shouldn't use their original loader, and then I replaced it with my loader. And then how they stored stuff on the tape or on the disk, I never looked at that. So I'm really impressed that you are working in that dimension as well. So as a member of the community, we are most grateful for your work.
Thank you. I mean, it's if you don't start doing these kind of things, you're pretty much blind. You can't actually know what the integrity of the files is. And actually, if you write that version of California Games back to disk, and it makes DTC makes the wrong choice, has made the wrong choice with the G64 to put the right splice. If you read it back and image it again, it will tell it to you there is a problem in track 27 on that specific sector where it got the right splice wrong. So in a sense, you can actually say, okay, I wrote this disk and I know it's not going to work. You totally know. But what is wrong, you don't know. When you have the knowledge I have on the low level, you know what I can do? I get the sector from a working disk and I put it in there. Maybe the other disk has got tracks 1 to 10 all broken. It doesn't really matter to me. As long as I can get that sector that I know it's broken and put it back, where it got broke, I can do these things all day long.
Yeah, I mean, it's taking puzzles. It's like taking files and then collect something that is from where parts are broken, but assuming that you have like different parts being broken in the different instances, then you can collect something which is, if you just know the working parts, and then you have at least one instance of every working part, then you can actually collect something that works.
Yeah, but when you do kind of forensic reconstruction, which is, you know, the level of reconstruction I do, as example, when I fixed the tape, you know, this was the only source of this tape. It was either I fixed it or we lost it. There was no in between. Yeah. It's either I fix it or it's gone. And it was frozen. So, you know, it's, in a sense, it helps you, because if it doesn't unfreeze, you already know that your reconstruction is not correct, right?
Yeah.
And so there was a whole block, we don't have a whole bunch of bits missing in the tape, in the tab file. And the tab file was sent to me after, you know, the owner of it, the one that produced it, had gone, you know, around the forums, and, you know, people had given up. And I said, okay, I'm more than happy to have a look. And I figured out that essentially the broken part, the lost data, was in between a text. This was one of these adventure games in which you had a little bit of graphic and a lot of text and commands to input. So fortunately, the damage was not in the code, but it was in the text. Still, the game wouldn't start because it was frozen. So I had to figure out, you know, okay, let me double check what the text is saying. And I did a reconstruction of what the text should have looked like. And that there was a comma involved, that there was, you know, 2 spaces because there was some padding to fit to screen. But in the end, I reconstructed the message. All the checksums were valid for the loading, because, you know, very often blocks would be protected when loaded for tape by the checksum. The file will start once I'm frozen. And so, you know, I had to actually fill in the data gap that way by making informed choice based on the context. So I didn't have anything else to, you know, compare it with, any other source, a cracked version or anything like that. That was it. And
what was the game?
It was, I mean, it's on my blog. I think it's called Shiru-No, la spada nella roccia, which was an Italian game. But I'm not quite sure whether it was a series actually of games by the same author.
Right. Well, I mean, I've done something close to that, and that was Masquerade, where one of the, well, we had a number of files that were broken in the original, and I collected a number of versions, and I replaced those that were to be found in a working format in one of the copies, but there was still one file that was broken. So we actually had somebody repaint that. It was a 5-block file. The middle block, the block number 3, was broken. So I reconstructed that, made a picture of it, had somebody, that was VDK, redrawing it, because I had a frame dump of how it looks on Apple II. And he painted that. And then I did a packer that packed it back to the original format. So, yeah. That's taking stuff to another level. That's reconstructing an original that would be lost in time forever. So great work.
Yeah, I did something similar for Chuck Rock. Now, Chuck Rock, the history behind Chuck Rock on tape was, you know, kind of a little bit of a riddle. There was only one copy. Somebody managed to buy it. I think they bought it off Mr. Fox. And they actually managed to dump it. Now, side 2 was not working. And I asked for dumps of that, and, you know, and even audio samplings of it. And the first 20 seconds of side B were missing completely. Now, fortunately, back in the day, there was this Italian group, I think it was ICS, Italian Cracking Service. They did a clean crack. So the file from tape, they essentially cracked the tape version, and the file from tape was in that disk version. And actually, if you replaced the data of that file, what would happen is that the checksum for that block on tape was the same, which gave me great confidence that, you know, again, the data in the ICS version was exactly the same as the one on tape and could be used to do that reconstruction. And actually, I produced the tab file for side B. Otherwise, that game for tape would have never existed in our, you know, digital archive.
So you basically reconstructed Chuck Rock, the original, on tape.
Yeah, the first file of side B.
Yeah. But cool. So those of you who think that Luigi is a software only guy, you're grossly mistaken, because now we're moving into the second part, and that would be Luigi's work on hardware.
Right.
You make an awesome series of tape interfaces. So people wanting to dump their C64 original tapes to tap files. And if you also have a number of tap files and you don't want to play them on an emulator, you have a number of units that can also act as a virtual tape recorder, which you can control via a little display and some buttons. So take us through that.
Yeah, I should add that the bonus of loading tap files from one of these devices is that you never get load errors. Because back in the day, it was quite.
But it takes equally long.
It takes equally long, but all the load tunes, you can enjoy them, load features, you can enjoy them. It's kind of the true experience. Yeah, this started a long time ago. We're talking about the early 2000s when I was getting involved with the tap community, and at the time late 90s, early 2000s, the most used method to make digital backups of 8-bit tapes, not necessarily just Commodore 64, but Commodore 64, there was, there has always been a huge community behind the Commodore 64. So most people was using Marcus Brenner's MTAP PC program, and that required pure DOS. So you couldn't just open MS-DOS prompt back in the day and run it. You had to restart in MS-DOS mode, and you needed a parallel port with the C64S interface initially, but then he added lots of support for the later interfaces. And before that, there was even a precedent before Marcus' program, which was Richard Stover's CBM tape tools, which is what I started with. I built my own C64S interface, and I started with that program to dump tapes. But the reality is that early in the 2000s, that whole strategy was not possible anymore unless you had all the desktop laying around, and you could use that one to restart in MS, because they pretty much removed the parallel port from all the new hardware, and you couldn't start in MS-DOS anymore.
Right.
So I was a bit frustrated by that, because I knew that a lot of the tapes hadn't been digitized in a way that I thought it was good to just archive them and move on, and lots of collectors hadn't even entered this sort of effort. So what I thought, I said, look, I have got an electronics background by education, and my thesis was using a microchip DSP, and I said, you know what? While I was studying this DSP, I pretty much found that all the sort of hardware facilities that I need to dump tapes are there, 100%. I then had conversations, again, this was IRC times and email times, and I had the conversation with Lars Pontoppidan. Again, Lars, if you're watching, forgive me for getting your last name pronounced in a horrible way. I'm doing my best. It's but
I don't know Lars, but Lars sounds correct.
Lars is the author. Lars is the guy who actually made MMMC to IEC, which then was moved on to SD to IEC.
Okay.
So the original author was Lars, and we exchanged notes and comments. I think he provided some of the code for the SD card driver, which at the time he was distributing freely, was sharing freely. This was on a kind of on a friendly sort of sharing basis. And he said, I know that you've been working with microchip and with DSPs, but what do you think about the Atmel microcontrollers? And I started having a look, and I said, look, the DSP that I was working with, this was always going to be an overkill in terms of capabilities and kind of clock speed and these sort of things. And I looked at the AVR family of the Atmels. Funnily enough, it's been acquired by Microchip anyway, so now it's Microchip. But they seemed perfect. And off I go. I I created the first version. I had no experience designing PCBs and that kind of stuff, but you know, I got it together and people wanted it. I had a blog on my own website, and yeah, it was all on a breadboard at the, you know, at the time I was showing the progress and all the development. So people started saying, "Oh, I want this," and I said, "Okay, but I really need to do also, you know, other than design the PCB and get it manufactured and, you know, built together, I also need, you know, to figure out how to case it, because otherwise it's just, you know, something collecting dust and that kind of stuff." So I have here one of the versions I've owned. This is, you know, kind of the one of the early models.
It looks very big compared to what I've seen later.
Just for comparison, this is version 4.
Yeah.
I'll get to the, yeah, this is just version 4. It doesn't do the same sort of things, but you know, yeah, it was quite huge, but also because it had, you know, a serial port. So this was a console port which had the recorder usage kind of feature. If you connected hyperterminal to this one, you would see the bands and you know, what we'll get to later.
Yeah, the skid marks.
Hyperterminal. So you could do alignment of the azimuth of the tape drive using this serial port.
But
yeah,
is this reading tapes or is it emulating tape? This is
both.
Reading tapes. Oh,
it's both of them.
Oh,
yeah. So you can dump them through this interface at the back, but there is also the tape port connector at the front.
Yeah.
I'm trying to avoid glare, but bear with me, you know, every now and then.
No, it looks fine. It looks perfectly fine.
Yeah. So yeah, this one, and the SD card was inserted at the back. Over here, there's a slot. I mean, this is all black, so it might be a bit.
No, we see it. We see it.
Yeah, that's fine. Yeah, and so yeah, this was the first model, and you know, just for comparison, the second one was already, you know, half the size. I mean, the depth as well was much thinner, and it did the same. So I mean, the sort of features was pretty much the same. Load tap files into a Commodore 64 or VIC-20 or C16 if you had the adapter. It supports, you know, this kind of the half-wave version that is kind of required for certain tape loaders for the Commodore 16. Then version 3 came on, and this had a graphic display, which I can actually demonstrate. I've got wired up here.
Oh, yes.
So, I mean, this is kind of graphics that I kind of, I mean, I'll have to say it. This was inspired to Turrican on the
You don't say. You don't say.
And yeah, I mean, it was, yeah, it's obvious. It's obvious. That it was like that. And yeah, the main difference at that point was that the third version, the one with the display, would actually write to the flash drive, a USB flash drive connected to it. And yeah, and I thought I would not need to do any other version from that point on. But what happened is that I you know, got in touch with Marcus Brenner, who mentioned he was interested in doing something along those lines, and he wanted to make a self-sufficient device connected by USB. And at the time, he mentioned that using a Tinsy tool, I think, and he actually asked me to send him one of the edge connectors, one of these connectors here. Because he wanted to try and build, you know, hook it together and do some development. By that time, I think he had already left Germany and moved to East Europe. I think he went to Croatia or something like that. I don't remember, but yeah. And I didn't hear any progress at that point. So I thought, you know, how hard could it be for me to just do this? And the Tinsy was using the very same processor I was using anyway. I mean, the same family, essentially. So the same compiler, the same, you know, development environment ID and everything. So I put together version 4 of DC2N, and this is actually based on a Tinsy. itself. But then I found out that you could actually use a Pro Micro, which was kind of the poor man version of the Tenzi, and it costed so much less. And I put together, this is one for low cost, which is called the low cost because it uses, kind of the knockoff version of the Tenzi that it was very popular with the Arduino community. So by this point, the Arduino community had really become a mainstream. All of my projects don't use Arduino, but I in kind of unintentionally benefited from the fact that a lot of the parts, especially the breakout boards, would become so cheap now because there was, they were produced in very large quantities to cater for the Arduino community. And that was great because I was able to actually offer people this hardware for lower costs, which is always something I got a little bit of a pushback from users at times, especially on forums and that sort of things, resulting sometimes in very kind of arguments, the kind of arguments that I'm not too proud about, but eventually I decided to work at version 5.
That's the one I have.
Yeah, you have this one, but you didn't go for the cased version. You went for the, you were showing it to one of the previous episodes.
I have the lower part.
Oh, you 3D printed.
Yeah, no, I had Sverker doing it for me. So
right.
Again, thanks Sverker.
Yeah.
I don't have any 3D printer, but this case works fine.
Yeah, I'm glad that's the case, because I think that case is for version 1.1. And the STL for version 1.1, I actually produced it by, kind of changing the one for 1.0. I was never, I never really was able to test it. But yeah, it's I'm glad you eventually got it, because I mean these things they attract dust, as if it were kind of their favorite thing to do.
Yeah. Well, my issue is I can't solder, so I bought 2 from you, and then I had somebody help me do the soldering, and then I had somebody else doing the 3D printing of the case. But since I didn't get back to the guy that did the soldering, he still has like one unassembled kit. So I just have one assembled kit, and eventually I will ask him to do the second one. But
yeah.
Right.
Yeah, that's pretty much all of the tape interfaces I've made over time. There is a kind of non-low cost version of DC-25, but that is just in a kind of prototyping breadboard situation, and it would actually display a JPEG with the tape cover when you were playing back a tap file. If there was it was a little bit on the deluxe sort of. Range. Yeah.
Coders getting building UIs, so it's I hear you. I fully understand why you would like that. It's a nice feature to have, of course.
Yeah.
Should we move into the IEC host then?
Yeah, and I've got a kind of quite neat version here. Ruben actually donated a box for this one. He had it manufactured this is in Holland. I mean, Ruben is based there, and you might see there is an extra cable on this one. An extra wire that I soldered.
The green thing.
Yeah, well, it's green on green PCP, but that wire is what allows this unit. I mean, anyone who solders this wire to nibble disks, not just to dump the disks in the D64 format. So that is something that came later on. But it all started because at some point I was looking at Commodore's disk drive routines in the kernel.
Yeah.
I was fascinated with those routines. So I started.
How slow they could be.
How slow they could be. Yes. They are asynchronous, mind you.
Yeah.
So that also explains why they had to be like that. But the kind of the optimizations they could have done. But that aside, I thought how difficult would be to do this, and I had a lot of experience with embedded systems by that time. I had done, pretty much all of these versions of the DC-2N. And I said, I would like to replicate what the Commodore 64 does, but I would like to do that on a microcontroller. So I don't need to bring a Commodore 64 around when I want to make a disk transfer. Because I grew up with Start Commander when I wanted to transfer a disk, and that too, required the parallel port. Then there was the OpenCBM integration, that kind of stuff. And that was causing some headache to me, because I was aware of Zoom Floppy, Zoom 1541, and that kind of stuff. But every time Microsoft made a new version of their operating system, the Windows operating system, the drivers would just be a nightmare. You would have to actually have the developers, produce those drivers again. So I thought, I'll do something that doesn't require any driver, and I'll do my own thing. And I went on. I used one of the breakout boards that I had used a lot, and that's the same that I used in DC-2N4 low cost. I say, I'll replicate all of the basic features. So read the DOS sectors, read the directory, copy files back and forth, and that sort of thing. And then I thought, it'd be nice to actually get to the point where I can do whole disk dumps, because it takes too long to copy files across. As you know, it's
absolutely.
Yeah, you can make the routines 10 times faster, but the disk driver is not gonna be able to work with that. So you have to make them as slow as the original ones. So to that extent, I said, okay, you know what? I'll look what's already available there, and that's when I got familiar with the Zoom Floppy and the rest. But there was one of the solutions at the time that I had seen it at X, in I think this was 2010 when I first saw it, and it was warp copy by Graham. And I said, this is really, to me, is really the gold standard. And I said, I'll try to
just pause you there. So that one uses the PC, and then you have a network cable to a C64 with a network interface, and then the computer works as sort of a slave that is connected to the disk drive. So you basically use the C64 as some sort of interface towards the 1541. And just also we just capture that. So IEC is the serial port of a C64. So what we are talking about now, if this hasn't become apparent to you, is accessing disks, whereas the previous section was tapes. So yeah, just go on, just to ensure that we have everybody on board.
Yeah. I keep forgetting. I'm so familiar with these things. I can jump back and forth. I don't need any context. That's a good shout. Yeah, and I tried to get in touch with Graham at the time, and couldn't get any reply. So I would try with members of his team. I would try with the ESG in my team. He had a little bit a better network, so I eventually got in touch with his team. But they say he's not available actually at the moment, or you can't contact him at the moment. I say that's a shame, because I really wanted to be able to reuse his drive code.
Yeah.
And when it became evident that there was no way I could contact him, I said, pretty much a lot of the development back in the day was done by copying each other. I think it's the netiquette here. I'll just go on and I don't want to sound like I plagiarized Graham's work. I give him full recognition. It's mentioned in the client. It says clearly the warp copy code is from Graham.
I don't think anybody would say that you copied anything. So it's
and so what I had to do was just write all the fast routines that Graham has written for the Commodore 64 to interact with the drive. And I wrote them, I tested them, I used the logic analyzer to actually get the timing right. And, it was painstaking work. But in the end, I was able to actually read a whole disk image for a DOS disk in, 22.5 seconds. That was the benchmark, and I was able to replicate that. But I didn't need the Commodore 64 and RRNet cartridge, which means that, the people like MDZ in the transfer team didn't have to bring all this hardware across when he wanted to, transfer disks during X. And actually, he has been one of the, the main people giving, providing me with feature requests, asking for, and actually he was asking for so many things on behalf of the transfer team, credit to all of them, that I had to create an issue tracker. I mean, start using a cloud-based issue tracker to track, because the requests were coming, there were too many, and I had to use an issue tracker to, monitor the progress and say, okay, this will come in the next one. This needs to wait a little bit longer because it's a major change, or it's a breaking change with the firmware. So, we kind of fit in a kind of with some discipline, and I did that with the issue tracker. Yeah. So it was a lot of enhancements, and specifically a lot of features were used because of the mass dumping requirement that that Mansa had at the time. These guys get boxes and boxes. I don't know how they do it. They get a wall of boxes of discs to dump every single time.
Yeah, I meet them on a regular basis on Gubbdata in Lund. So Mason and the guys. So it's I've seen them work. It's like the modern swappers. All they do is sit there and feed the disk drive a new disk, and then the other side, and then do-dum. So if you can shave a second on every disk side, that converts into hours. It's
yeah. That's right. And I remember, one of the things Matt told me was, I need visual indicators on the GUI because these parties are noisy. I need to know when the process is done. I need, lights. I need something that strobes or something like that. And that's one of the reasons for which there is an indicator that it's green or red on the GUI. And also he said, during party events, I need the background to be black, not white, because otherwise it hurts my eyes. And I said, I understand that. I couldn't, I have thought about it, but you spend hours and hours in front of this thing. So I said, yeah, that's fine, absolutely. And I, inserted the color picker with which you can pretty much choose your own background, and then you save it as a setting. And but yeah, down to that minute detail, he was contributing, feature requests that I implemented. I was more than happy to implement. And I think at some point the transfer team were quite happy to, it was stable enough to use IC host for dumping disks at parties. Now I haven't seen them in a while. I was planning to go, but then COVID happened. So the last time I met them was 2018, I think, at the X party of 2018.
Yeah, I've missed the X party, so I tend to go to Gubbdata, and I'm really looking forward to Gubbdata this year. And I will try to come to X. So I would look forward to have a beer with you at X.
All right. Yeah.
That's a promise. That is actually a promise.
Yeah, let's do that.
Should we go to of course, there are tapes and there are discs. And if you think that Luigi was content with just doing tapes and discs, no, you are of course wrong, because there is also media on cartridge. And of course, Luigi has done a cartridge dumper. So the cartridge dumper.
Yeah, and its present form factor is this. So there is the cartridge connector here, again a Pro Micro, and it connects to a PC with the USB cable. And what this does, it lets you dump the whole contents of a cartridge, of a Commodore 64 cartridge, without having to open it. Now this came up when I was, writing on my blog. I was saying, I've got pretty much to the end of the road with the features I'm implementing for IC host, I think it was. I said, what do you think I should do next? And somebody, and apologies, I don't remember the name. Somebody said, why don't you make a cartridge dumper so that you don't need the Commodore 64 to dump cartridges? Because Mayhem had done, an excellent work back in the day, dumping all of these cartridges with, dumping tools that were written, some of them by Marcus Brenner himself, to dump Ocean and all of these exotic formats that are not the standard cartridge formats that they were meant to be used by Commodore. So the tricky bit here is that a lot of the commercial cartridges have more than 16 kilobytes of data in them. And the Commodore 64 can only address 8 kilobytes at any given time in either, either one of the sections that is mapped on top of the RAM. This swaps the RAM out, it swaps in essentially the read-only memory that's on a cartridge. But a lot of cartridges were using a lot of storage. The Action Replay 6 is using 32 kilobytes. Lots of Ocean cartridges use 128, 256, or even 512, half a megabyte of storage. And so the thing is, how do they address all of these? Bearing in mind that they can only use the address bus. They only use part of the address bus, I started reverse engineering the whole thing. I started buying Ocean tapes, unscrewing the security screw, for which I had to order a special screwdriver, and I looked into it, and I looked at the schematics. I looked at the material online. I said, okay, this checks in. I understand this, and I said, you know what? I can dump this stuff without the Commodore 64. It's really simple. It's really trivial to do that. I said that the only thing is that I don't want to code a software that allows me to just dump certain formats. I want to make this extensible so that say you have Pontus, you have got a kind of an exotic cartridge, yeah. And I didn't code a decoder for it. You cannot ship it. You cannot open it. You don't want to open it because it kind of, if you break the label to access the screw, you actually lose a lot of, the value that you could get into, sort of a retro computing or enthusiast circle. In that market, it would lose a lot of value if you break the label. So let's suppose that you are in that circumstance, and you can start tinkering around and writing your own script to actually dump those tapes, and only eventually, if you really have no idea, cannot access any documentation or any sort of knowledge or wisdom from back in the day, all at that point you would have no recourse but open the cartridges, check what the logic is, and you could actually write your own Lua scripts to dump your format without me having to change anything in the software or the firmware of the dumper itself. So it was really meant to be something that I could send out to people with lots of cartridges, but with also the ability to hack things around and take traces and make schematics, go there with the multimeter, find all the paths, continuity testing, maybe even desoldering sometimes, just to find out what was actually on the chip itself. Because by all means, if you open the cartridge, you desolder the memory chips and you dump them with an EEPROM reader, that's fine. You achieve the same thing. But with my method, you don't need the Commodore 64 and you don't need to open the cartridge in the ideal scenario, which means preserving the full value of the cartridge. So that was always the sort of attempt I wanted to to make. And it was fun. I myself acquired the cheap cartridges I could buy online on eBay. A lot of them are the Ocean Software one. Shadow of the Beast as example, I think at some point I got Navy SEALs, Terminator, that kind of stuff. But then I was also helped by other people who have larger collections, who can provide schematics. Richard Buffin. Again, apologies if I'm getting their last name wrong, pronunciation-wise.
That's absolutely fine.
Tried my best.
Well, I'm not Richard, so I can't say okay on his behalf.
But if Richard, if you're watching, forgive me. Forgive me.
So we can just say that anybody having opinions on pronunciations on names, could you just sample how you say it and post a link to that sample so we can hear and we can learn and we can be better next time? So
always happy to be to do better for next round. And so it essentially has evolved like this. I'm not quite sure whether I can do every single format, but definitely if people are willing to get, people with cartridges, exotic cartridges, are willing to get these and do a little bit of hacking, maybe soldering a resistor if there comes a need, that kind of activity. I'm more than happy to, facilitate the process. And then with Richard, we're doing a lot of this. We're testing a lot of, the cartridges, these dumping scripts. Recently, we did dynamic cartridges with, the Spanish software house, with the one for Astro Marine Corps and Saturn, I think it was. So I mean, a lot of knowledge is actually in the source code for Vice, because they support all of these formats. So a lot of the documentation in there is already quite a good base. Some of it has, I need to raise a request on this one. Some of it is either incomplete or wrong, and I'll probably raise an issue on SourceForge where the source is. But as example, I think Navy SEALs itself is not a 256 kilobyte cartridge, and it's 128. And back in the day when it was dumped, all the upper area is just blanks. Okay. So it really is 100.
And nobody realized.
I myself didn't realize until somebody told me. I'm not quite sure whether they had bought a cartridge number, but they say, look, by the way, you're doing this research, you're putting together all this documentation, all these references for the future, and this is what I found out. And I gave him credit on my blog. Just sorry, I don't remember your name. It's just something I should have thought about.
It's on the blog, so there you can read it.
It is on the blog. It's credited, yeah.
So is there any cartridge you cannot dump at the moment, or?
Not that I have, but as far as I understand, there are certain cartridges, they use certain specific EPROMs, I think, that they just Space Gun is the only one I'm aware of that at the moment cannot be dumped. And I think it's one of the two versions that are around. One of them can be dumped and the other one can't. But pretty much we got a lot of the ocean ones covered. Yeah, almost all of them.
Cool. That was cartridge dumper. I think we're up to an hour now, but I'm happy to go on because this is absolutely interesting. And it might be that we eventually split this into two, but let's just go on until both of us are totally exhausted, and we will have Torsten being responsible for ensuring that this comes out in a form that can be digested by people. There is one additional piece of hardware, and that is the USB host 64.
Oh, right, yeah. That one was quite fun to make as well, and it really was. I have got a special attachment to that one because it never became a commercial product. If you can call the other ones commercial, I mean, none of them is commercial. But I was, doing the research for DC-213, which has got a USB host capability, so you can connect a flash drive to it and save. When you're dumping tapes, you save them to a USB flash drive. And I had got so familiar with the USB host board that there is inside the DC-213, and I said, you know what? If I hook this to a Commodore 64, I can actually give the Commodore 64, access to USB flash drives. And I did the version. The first version was using. I think it was a serial interface to communicate with this USB host. So it was a little bit slower. And then I say, you know what, it's great. It's better than, a lot of things I've seen, but I really want to use the 8080 bus, the parallel bus. And I want to transfer a whole byte every time I, flip a line. And so I did that. And started benchmarking these things, and I was getting very, very good speed, and I could access FAT32 file systems on FAT16 and FAT32 file systems on USB flash drives. Could load stuff in it would take longer to unpack this stuff because it was crunched than to load it. That's how crazy it was back in the day. And I was really fascinated with the load times that I started actually making my own releases of certain software and games to actually load from my, I mean, I would do exactly what you would say you would do. You would find out in which point the game was trying to access data, and I would make that data accessible by a different interface that was way faster. And so I think I did I did very simple ones. The Sword of Fargo which is one of the releases I did for Hokuto Force. I actually did the version that was a basic one. It was very easy because I made drivers in assembly for this thing, for USB host 64, but I also made a basic extension. So new commands to the basic. So you would actually start my extension, and you would have uinit, uload, usave available to you as extra commands in basic mode.
But you don't have a kernel where you kick out the tape routines and insert this instead. So it would load from, this would be like device, I don't know, 12 or?
No, I didn't do it in that fashion. Because that would have required a little bit of tinkering, replacing EPROMs. I'm pretty sure at some point it would, because I mean there are checks in the kernel that say if this device is more than is more than 3, or if this device is 1, or there are checks in there.
For sure. I mean, just if you want to have something which sort of works outside the box, where this would be sort of work with anything, then you basically need to have it in kernel. Otherwise you need to have like support system or retrofit every single program there is. Something that just reverts back to loading from kernel would work if kernel is equipped with this. And we should also say that, so USB host is a unit you stuff into the user port. So not the cartridge port, but the user port. And then you can have a USB there, and then you can load from that USB as if it was some sort of other like external device. It becomes your disk drive, a very fast disk drive. So something like SD to IEC for the serial port, but this is for the user port instead. And given that the user port is, you can have the full 8-bit, a full byte read at the time, it should be really fast, right? So
it is very fast. I mean, there are benchmark videos. I think it was, I mean, by all means, the code is not optimized. I mean, bear in mind, this was put together in a weekend in the summer of 2010. And it was really literally mad coding until 4 o'clock in the morning for 2 days in a row. So that was
I have no idea what you mean. I've never done anything like that.
No, none of the listeners and watchers has ever done anything like that. Absolutely, definitely.
My youth, when I suddenly hear the birds outside waking up, I realize that I spent too long during the night. That sort of me is the marker for, oh no, I will have a rough tomorrow.
Yeah, and I've been there. I've done that. Yeah, absolutely.
Okay, so we're moving out of the hardware space, unless you have something you want to add here. Is there any piece of hardware that you have done that I've missed now? Of course there is.
These are not super popular, but this one gives you an RTC capability on the Commodore 64. So you have a real-time clock, and there is a GEOS integration. So from there is a normal driver that you can use in your own programs, and you have a current date and time. Quite neat, but never really hit this kind of GA. The C2N monitor, I mean, this is actually an attachment I use for testing, but this one, it's kind of that recorder use touch feature that you can, this is a man in the middle, essentially. This is a device you put in between the tape port and a C2N, a tape drive, and it actually displays, those nice bands that we will cover later on, I guess.
It's like Wireshark for tapes.
Yeah, it is, yeah. And this one, again, I don't think I'm selling it anymore, but this is essentially the counterpart of DC-24. DC-24 and C2N AMO are essentially all together, they constitute what was DC2 in the previous version. So one does only dumping to reduce costs essentially, and one does only playback. And for these two, the clients are again multi-platform, and I've compiled them for Mac at some point. Yeah, but yeah, there is other hardware, but it's all in kind of breadboard kind of configurations. But I think, you know, we've gone through pretty much most of it.
My only issue with this is that we didn't really learn soldering in law school where I went to school. So my soldering skill and also my equipment is really poor. I rely on somebody else doing it for me. And since you don't do most of the soldering, then you need somebody else to do it for you. Which is sort of my only issue. The stuff you are producing is absolutely top notch, but you are producing them in rather small series, because I also understand you don't want to sit there soldering during the night. So
yeah, I mean, I never really had any aspiration to do this as, you know, primary job or a kind of side hustle, or because, you know, I can't cope with demand, the volumes. Even if I had part of this manufactured, I just I don't like to get into that dimension where, I mean, all of this, each one of these is a piece of craft work that some people have bought just so that when it becomes kind of older, it becomes collectible. I mean, some people have never, probably bought this and never used it, just with the hope of being able to resell it with the markup. I don't know, but I mean, there are definitely people who have never used them.
Don't buy them unless you want to use them. These are good pieces of equipment that you should really use. If you are one of those rare people that bought them, use them.
Absolutely, absolutely. I mean, the shocking thing is that I heard of an American guy. He actually went to a meeting, you know, kind of a retro meeting or something like that. He saw IC Host. And the guy who had the IC host sold it to him for $100. And I said, you're crazy. I mean, you could have asked, you know, maybe if you asked him where it go, you know, where he got it, you know, you could have ordered it for me. I mean, it would have been so much cheaper. I said, no, I mean, I'm totally fine with that. You know, it gives me value. I have lots of this to dump, you know, it gives me the value. So I'm more than happy. But not only that, you know, I think at some point he felt like he really wanted an extra feature coded for him, because essentially he said the log that IC Host produces is perfect. You know, I can do a lot of things. I can see the original checksums as well, and this sort of thing. But now I have got this many disks. I've already dumped them with other software. I want to produce similar logs so that I can do comparisons between logs in the same format. Can you write the option for me to do this? And I actually wrote a crawler for him. It's a program, and I'll probably publish it at some point. So this program, you point it to a folder, and it goes, you know, recursively into all the subfolders, and wherever it finds a D64, it creates a log with, you know, if there are errors and these sort of things. But it also creates the whole sort of image that you see in IC Host when the client, when you dump a disk. So all the sectors, which one is used, which one is, you know, according to the BAM table, you know, the file table, and they produce that one as a PNG image for each disk. And yeah, and I did it for him. And he actually said, no, I mean, I value this so much. He actually made a PayPal donation, I think, at that point. And so it was very well, but there are people speculating on this thing because he bought it for $100, and I was a little bit upset with that. Not that, I mean, you know, it's kind of, it's a market. Yeah, if there is somebody who offers it and somebody wants it, that's fine. Sort it out between yourselves. But I was happy to, you know,
it's one of those things. There are a number of people who would like to own a Commodore 64, but they are so expensive because people want number 50, 51, and 52 that just sits in their basement, and I never really understood that. I want to have the stuff that I'm using, and if I'm not using it, I'm willing to part with it. That's fine.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
No, we're not going into the software for the C64. at least not this week. You will have to wait until the next week. It's already been like 80 minutes or whatever it's taken so far. I can promise you another hour of talk with Luigi next week. And the part I really wanted to talk to him about was tape loaders and those skid marks. And I can promise you that there is a run through of how that works at the end of next week's episode. But this is everything you get for this week. Fingers crossed everything will work out and you can continue watching Luigi explaining his stuff early next week. So see you then.